Right everyone, I've got something quite significant to share about the weather pattern developing over the next week or so. The computer models have been consistently showing the same thing for several days now, and it's looking increasingly likely we're in for quite a change. What we're seeing is a strong high-pressure system building over Scandinavia that's going to fundamentally alter our weather pattern. Now, before I dive into the details, please do let me know in the comments where you're watching from. This will affect different parts of the UK differently. Whether you're in London, up in Manchester, over in Cardiff, or anywhere across the country, your location matters for this forecast. Right now, you're probably experiencing fairly typical January weather. Bit of rain, cloudy skies, temperatures around 8 to 11 degrees. But this high-pressure system over Scandinavia is strengthening, and it's going to act like a big roadblock for our usual westerly weather patterns. What this means in practical terms is that instead of getting our weather from the Atlantic, we'll start getting it from continental Europe. And here's the thing, it's been properly cold across Eastern Europe lately, with temperatures well below freezing. The models are showing quite good agreement, but this pattern shift will happen towards the end of next week, around the 23rd, 24th of January. For London and the southeast, you could see temperatures dropping to around freezing during the day, with nights well below zero. That's quite a shock to the system when you've been used to 10-degree days, isn't it? Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, you're looking at daytime temperatures struggling to get much above freezing. Up in Scotland, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Aberdeen, you could see sustained sub-zero conditions both day and night. The eastern parts of England, places like Norwich, Cambridge, Hull, you'll feel this continental air most directly. Now, what makes this interesting is the timing of when this cold air arrives and how it interacts with any weather systems. During the changeover period, there's potential for some significant snowfall as Atlantic moisture meets the incoming cold air. The models are suggesting areas like the Midlands, parts of Yorkshire, maybe even reaching down towards London, could see accumulating snow. Now, I know some of you are thinking, finally, some proper winter weather, and you might well get your wish. But it's worth remembering that we've had such a mild winter so far that many people aren't really prepared for a sudden cold snap. So let me give you some practical advice about what you might want to check over the next few days. If you've got a car, it's worth making sure your antifreeze is topped up and your battery's in good condition. Cold weather can be harsh on car batteries, especially if they're getting on a bit. At home, if you've got pipes in exposed areas like garages or outbuildings, just check they're properly insulated. It's also worth making sure you've got your heating working properly. Maybe give it a test run if you haven't used it much this winter. For those with elderly relatives or neighbours, it might be worth checking in on them as we get closer to this change. Sudden temperature drops can be particularly challenging for older people or those with health conditions. Now, what's quite fascinating about this pattern is how consistent the models have been over the past few days. Usually, you see quite a bit of variation in the forecasts at this range, but they've been remarkably steady on this scenario. The European model, the American GFS, even some of the newer AI-based models, they're all pointing in the same direction. What they're showing is this high-pressure system becoming really quite established over northern Europe. Think of it like a big atmospheric dam. It blocks the usual flow of mild Atlantic air and redirects everything. Instead of winds coming from the southwest bringing mild, moist air, you get easterly winds bringing cold, dry, continental air. The last time we had a really strong pattern like this was back in early 2018. The beast from the east, as it got called. Now, I'm not saying this will be exactly the same, but there are definitely similarities in the setup. What made 2018 particularly challenging was how quickly it happened and how unprepared everyone was. That's why I'm talking about this now, so you've got time to prepare rather than being caught off guard. The other thing worth mentioning is that once these patterns establish themselves, they can be quite persistent. We might not be talking about just a few days of cold weather. This could potentially last well into February. Of course, weather patterns can change, but the signals we're seeing suggest this could be quite a sustained spell. For those of you asking about specific snow chances, it's still a bit early to pin down exactly where and when. But the setup during the transition period, likely around next Thursday through to the weekend, does look promising for snow. Areas that are most likely to see significant accumulations would be the Midlands, Northern England, and parts of southern Scotland. London and the southeast might catch some as well, but it depends on the exact track of any weather systems. The key thing to watch for is when that first Atlantic system tries to push against the incoming cold air. That's typically when you get your heaviest snowfall, right along that boundary between the air masses. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking about travel plans for next weekend or the following week. It's worth keeping an eye on the forecasts, particularly if you're planning any long journeys or have important commitments. Transport networks in the UK can struggle when we get sudden weather changes, especially if it involves snow or ice. The good news is that we've got several days' warning, so there's time for preparations to be made. What's particularly interesting from a meteorological perspective is how this pattern might affect energy demand. We've had such a mild winter that heating demand has been well below average. That's about to change quite dramatically. If you're on a variable energy tariff, you might want to keep that in mind as we head into this colder period. For gardeners watching, it's probably worth protecting any tender plants that you might have outside. After such a mild start to winter, plants might be more vulnerable to sudden cold than they normally would be. And if you've got outdoor water features or pipes, now's a good time to make sure they're protected against freezing. Looking ahead beyond this immediate cold spell, it's possible this could signal a more active end to winter. Sometimes when you get these strong blocking patterns, they can lead to more interesting weather throughout February and March. Of course, that's getting quite far ahead in forecast terms, but it's something to keep an eye on. What I'll be watching over the next few days is how consistent the models remain with this scenario. If they continue to show the same pattern, confidence will increase even further about this cold spell developing. I'll also be looking at the exact timing and intensity of any snow events during the transition period. The difference between snow and rain often comes down to just a degree or two, so timing is absolutely crucial. For those of you in different parts of the country asking about your specific areas, please do keep commenting. I'll try to address as many locations as possible in the next few videos as this pattern develops. Wales, particularly the eastern valleys, could see some significant cooling, though perhaps not as extreme as eastern England. Northern Ireland might escape the worst of it due to its western position, but you'll still notice a definite change. The Scottish Highlands are likely to see the most dramatic conditions, proper mountain winter weather. Coastal areas might get some slight moderation from the sea, but not enough to prevent significant cooling. What's quite remarkable is how rapidly this change could happen once it gets going. You could literally go from 10-degree temperatures on Wednesday to near freezing by Friday. That's quite a shock to the system, both for people and for infrastructure that's been used to mild conditions. The key message really is to use this advance warning wisely. Check your preparations and make sure you're ready. I'll be back with updates as we get closer to this pattern change and as the models fine-tune the details. Please do subscribe if you haven't already and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates on this developing situation. And remember to share your location in the comments. It really helps me tailor the forecasts to what you need to know. Whether you're looking forward to some proper winter weather or you're dreading the cold, this looks like being quite a significant change. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you again soon with more details on this fascinating weather pattern.